Erratic is the only word I can use for the real estate market right now. And it doesn't matter what price. It does not matter what price.
So this video was sent to me by a client of mine who lives out of state. Glenda Baker, who's a realtor in Atlanta, shot this video talking about the market in Atlanta. And so my client who lives in Utah saw it, sent it to me and said, is a market like this in Arizona? So the gist of the video is she's talking about buyer activity, and she called her lender and said, do you have a lot of buyers who are pre-qualified that aren't buying? Because she's experiencing in Atlanta a lack of buyer activity. So are you seeing that here?
We are, for sure. And I think there's many layers to this that we can kind of get into and the why behind it.
Right.
So we have a ton of buyers that are fully pre-qualified. They can
everything's signed, ready to go.
They can technically afford the house on paper,
right,
but they're sitting on the sidelines. And there's a couple reasons for this. Obviously, the media headlines, which we've talked about previously, is a big aspect of this. They just came out with some data saying that sellers and buyers have never been further apart. There's more inventory on the market, and there's never been less demand for home buying. So we're starting to see this separation between a seller and a buyer to the point where something's got to give. And I know we were just talking about this, something's got to give, whether that be an interest rate or potentially price reduction. So I think sellers are under the assumption that their home is perfect, their condition of their house is perfect. They bought these homes, a lot of them during COVID, without inspection. So there were statistics that just came out in May showing that it was the highest cancellation rate. So buyers are now extremely picky with inventory. So
they get an escrow, and you're seeing a high cancellation rate as a lender.
Yes. So it was over 15% nationally, which they haven't seen those numbers since they've started recording the data. So we're seeing buyers, because the affordability issue with home prices and interest rates, being super, super picky when they do get off the sidelines to actually buy something. So I think that's one of the major things. And if we're just kind of talking about interest rates right now, it's been up and down. So we've seen some fluctuation in rates over the last month or two. A lot of it's due to the tariffs and seeing how that settles. The Fed's sitting on the sideline and cutting rates right now because they want to see what's going to happen with the tariffs, and that could change the cost to the consumer for things like gas or whatever.
Day-to-day expenses.
Yeah, day-to-day expenses. So we're seeing the consumer at some points get tied to this interest rate without necessarily seeing the added benefit of the future appreciation gains that they may see.
So where are you seeing interest rates like really land? Are they, I mean, you said they're kind of fluctuating, but where are they kind of averaging out?
So over the last, I would say 2 months on average, if you look at it, they've hovered around the 7% mark. Okay. And that's on a national average, depending on the loan product,
the program,
et cetera. Yeah. So there really hasn't been much give or softening in interest rates. If I had to guess, we'd probably hover around here unless something economically changes. That's drastic. We saw some reprieve in rates over the last week or so with the stuff going on overseas. So I would anticipate we stay around the 7% mark. And I know inventory's gone up substantially. I don't know the numbers on that, but there is more out there for a buyer right now.
Well, so what I'm seeing is the high rate environment, more inventory, prices have come down in certain areas, but we're still seeing appreciation overall, in the housing market. So we have the high rate environment, higher price homes, and this deadlock of buyers staying on the sidelines. So something's got to give, right? It's either going to be home prices or interest rates. What I'm seeing on the listings that I have in certain price ranges, the real activity is buyer relocation, right? So somebody moving here for a job transfer. I had a scenario over the weekend where we actually had a house in Goodyear where it's priced in the mid 400s, haven't had any offers in over 100 days. This weekend I had 3 relocation buyers come in town. It was shown 3 times. We got 2 offers, both relocation, both asking for 3% concessions, identical offers. It came in at the exact same price. And the urgency on these buyers was they had to be here for a job. They were also being a corporate relocation. They got some funds from the relocation company to assist in this. And also my seller was participating in concessions. So that brought the rate down for them. The only way they could afford the home is because of the rate buy down they were getting on the concessions, So that's how these deals are being put together. New build, new construction, they're baking in this interest rate reduction on a 30-year fixed mortgage. I've seen them as low as 3.99.
Which is crazy.
And those are in the outlying areas and commutable distances to jobs. But we're seeing this. That's the only way this deal got put together for these buyers. A local buyer, wasn't looking at this property.
Yeah,
right?
and that's in that price range is more first-time home buyers.
Right.
And I've talked to hundreds of first-time home buyers in the last 12 months, and getting them to understand the long-term gains of purchasing a home is hard right now, because they only see the 7% interest rate. We show them the options for buy downs and stuff, but at the end of the day, you can't force anyone to buy.
Right.
And that we're just here to give as much information as possible so that they can make an educated decision moving forward. If it's not now, if it's in a year, I do think if you can afford a payment, and we've said this for the last 2 years now, and you are in the market for a home, you can get a good deal on a house right now.
Right.
So.
No, I agree. And I feel like both of these offers, they were identical. My seller selected one of the offers. They did get a good deal on the house. And I think, and it was a win for my seller as well, because she can move on with her life, right? And sell the house. But the urgency came because it was a corporate relocation. So that's the real driver of the market right now. If you need to move here for a job or relocation, right?
Yeah. And the other thing that you can think about is there's so much equity that's been built up in these sellers. And because the demand is so far apart from the inventory, the sellers are going to have to give at some point. They're going to have to realize, okay, there's $41 trillion of equity right now nationwide. And if we have to give 10% just to get our house sold, if it's a necessary thing, that's something that they're going to have to look into. And there's a lot of sellers with poorly conditioned homes that aren't necessarily ready to hit the market that are sitting for 120 days. So.
Right. And in this case, the seller had significant equity, and it was, we were looking at price reductions, but instead of reducing price, we offered the concessions. And that's what, that is a bigger bang for the buyer than dropping the price down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's super important too, with you advocating for your seller to not necessarily price reduce, but offer the buyer an incentive to purchase the home, which is happening in new builds now, which you talked about, and it's happening all over. It's the experience, obviously, of you being in the market and knowing what's going on.
What are you seeing speaking of concessions, because we know they're out there and a lot of buyers are asking for them, what's the percentage of your contracts that you're seeing that have seller concessions?
So Maricopa County, I think, is over 50%. I would say that we're coaching our clients and agents to ask for concessions almost every deal, unless they're an experienced investor and don't necessarily need it to move up. But I would say the vast majority, over 60%, I would say, are getting concessions. And during the inspection period process, a lot of them are getting additional concessions on top of that to cover the repairs. So there's plenty of give out there with the equity that's been built up, and I think that's something of note in this market.
Exactly. Good. So I wanted to run that by you because I thought it was interesting that a client from out of state sent me a video from another agent in Atlanta that was talking about the market. And I was curious if because the client asked me, is this happening here? And it is, right? It's the same market. I think it's happening pretty much in a lot of metro areas.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So if you have any questions about a scenario, just run it by Craig and I, and we'd be happy to help.
Great. Thanks.